Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Wisconsin Investor Podcast. I am your host, Corey Raymond, and I'm excited today because, again, I always try to bring you guys amazing guests, and I have another one lined up for you today. We're going to get into some really juicy stuff today that I nerd out on, and I love talking about this kind of stuff, but I'm going to save that for a second because, as I do usually, I'm going to do a little commercial for Wisconsin Discount Properties, who sponsors the show. I think I talked about this on a different episode, but I'm going to talk about a deal that I picked up, actually, from Wisconsin Discount Properties in the Oshkosh area. So this is one that was out to the list. If you're not on the buyer's list, you can get on there by going to wisconsindiscountproperties.com and putting your information in. We had sent an email out. It's a trailer house in Oshkosh on about a half acre with an attached garage. It's on a normal foundation, so it's not like, somebody can come just pick this baby up and move it, but nobody wanted it. Nobody offered on it. And so that's usually what happens. If I'm picking up a deal, it's usually because we ran it through our process and nobody wanted it. So now I snatch it up. And I'll tell you what, this deal ended up being, it's going to be a phenomenal deal. We got it for, I believe, 50 or 55,000. Had it out to the list for a little higher. As the boss, I get a little discount on some of these things. But regardless, it would have worked either way. We've got about 5,000 into the property, and we just signed a lease for $1,295 on this bad boy. So I'm going to be all into it for about $60,000, maybe less. And it's going to rent for almost $1,300 a month. Now, not the sexiest property in the world. You look at it from the outside, it doesn't look great, but it gets the job done. It's bringing the rent in, and it's going to cash flow like crazy. So imagine adding 10 of those to your portfolio, what that could do for you. If you're missing out on these deals, you're not making offers, you can do that again. Go to wisconsindiscountproperties.com, plug your information in, and get added to the buyer's list and start getting deals like this sent to your inbox every Monday morning, 6 a.m. With that, let's get into today's episode. I got my brother from another mother, Kolten Van Elzen, here, buddy. What's going on, Colton?
What's up, Corey? Glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you. Yes, Colton and I met actually through church years ago when you were still in high school, right?
That is correct. I was going to wonder if you remember. I vividly remember how we met was through the Guatemala mission trip.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if you and Carrie remember this, but the reason you guys got to go on there is because there was a little cow that plotted on your spot.
Oh, yeah. I remember that vividly. I tell people about that story all the time. Yep. That was to give our audience a little background on that. So Wisconsin, this is one of the things I love about Wisconsin. There was a charity fundraiser. I donated $50 to I think it was juvenile arthritis, something or another, for somebody in one of my networking groups. And I forgot all about it. And it was for the Big Ox Plop Bingo. So what happens here and some charity fundraisers is they mark off these different squares, and then they release these cows. I believe I've never actually seen it, but this is what I'm told. And if the cow poops in your square, you win what it said prize, right? So for the $50 prize, the winnings were $12,500. And at the time, this was 2016, I think, Colton. Is that when we went?
Yeah, it's 2016, 2017. Yeah.
Somewhere in that ballpark. We didn't have a lot of money. And so we had signed up to do this missions trip that Colton and I went on together, and that's how we met. And we didn't have enough money to go on it, but you tithe. We're big believers in tithing, and God shows up and provides in mysterious ways. And boom, big ox plot bingo was one way God was. I was kind of laughing. I'm like, "You're funny, God." That's a good
we're
one.
going on this trip now.
I guess we're going on this trip. Thank you, sir. So we went on this missions trip. We had a great time. We got to build some wells in Guatemala together in about 110-degree heat and humidity, I think, right? So it sounded about right.
Yeah. We worked our butts off.
We sure did. We got not one well, but two wells.
We were overachievers.
And then we brought that work ethic back. And today we apply it in real estate investing, right?
Exactly. The funny thing is that was when you guys were just getting into wholesaling, or like you guys were just starting your business. And I remember we were, the many van rides where you got hours to just sit and chit chat, and you're talking like, yeah, I'm going to call these people and door knock on them. I'm going to sign a contract, and I'm just going to sell these contracts. I was like, that sounds illegal. Like, that doesn't seem right. Like, my parents had a building background. I'm like, no, you do the traditional list with your agent and do all this P's and Q's that, we're told about. And, you've done well with it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was, yeah, you're right. That was like right when we were starting up in 2016. So it's been a fun ride since. And let's talk a little bit about you though, Colton. So you also have some real estate investing that you do, but
Yep,
you're also a underwriter for Capital Credit Union on the business commercial side, correct?
that is correct. So yeah, a little bit about me. Born and raised in Green Bay, so true Wisconsinite. Slight trader in me. I went out to the University of Minnesota, so I studied out there, got my degree at
Ooh.
Gopher, and loyal Vikings fan now. Being converted when Brett Favre went.
Whoa.
I know.
Whoa.
I
We
don't know
might
if you
have to end this
can
podcast.
Lambo in the background here, but
Yeah. Wow.
yeah,
That's gotta just be hard to look at every day now since you're purple people here.
exactly. Uh, get the inside information. Send it back to the Vikings.
That's
But
right.
no, studied finance accounting, got my degree out there, came back. My wife's from here. So we did the traditional house hacking route. That's how we kind of got into real estate and kind of done networking and all that and trying to learn more.
Mhm.
Did our first flip last year. So, that was fun.
Nice, man.
A lot of learning lessons. And then, yeah, been working in commercial underwriting for the last 3 years, 3.5 years. So get to see all of the other experienced real estate investors and business owners kind of come through and see how they do operations, and a lot of good learnings from there as well.
That's awesome, man. That is so cool. We got a lot we can unpack today, and I'm excited to talk about it because you presented for the REI Success Club, which is a little club that we host in Green Bay. And you brought, I mean, you had just like some amazing information, is what the feedback was. I was down here in Florida, so unfortunately I wasn't able to attend, but I said, man, I got to get Colton on here because I love talking about the economy and what's happening. And I always like to try to figure out where's the puck going, right? Like
Yep.
that's one of the things I don't want to know where the puck is at today. I want to look ahead and say, where's this thing going the next 6 months or 12 months? And so we're going to get into some of that a little bit. Talk about the flip though. How did you guys end up doing on the flip?
So it was a 3-bed, 2-bath ranch in Green Bay. Bought
Slam
it
dunk.
off another wholesaler. Sorry, not to.
Ooh.
I know, I know.
This guy's a
Uh,
trader all around, man. Go out in Minnesota. He's cheating on me with other wholesalers.
Call me
Jeez.
Benedict Arnold, man. I know.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, it was one of those hoarder houses. They supposedly, per the neighbor, had 30 cats in this house. 30. It smelled
Oof.
like it. It smelled like it.
Wow.
And the people that were leaving were so generous. They left us a cat.
Wow. That was really
Yeah,
nice of them.
yeah, we couldn't find it, but they left it. And they
Wow.
said, "Here's some food, and let us know if you find it. Here's our number." Um,
Wow.
yeah, and so the great story of it was we found the cat 3 months later in the ductwork,
No. Dead?
not alive anymore,
Yeah, as I say, that's
in the middle of summer. So,
oh
yeah, our house smelled even better.
wow.
It was quite a learning experience there,
My goodness.
but nothing a little kills can't cover and remove the smell from. And we cleaned it up, fixed it up really nice. And we got it ready and sold. One of the things is when you get these projects, you're like, oh, it's going to go boom, boom, boom. We're going to be done in and out of here in 2-3 months. And 6 months later, we were at the closing table and getting it sold. But we made a small profit. I roped my parents into it, and
Okay.
if it wasn't for them, I don't think we would have profited, because my dad's skill set and being able to figure out the problems and not
Okay.
have to pay the higher contractor fees. We were able to save some money, but the dollar per hour wasn't good. But hopefully the education on the back end for future flips is kind of where the payoff will hopefully be.
Oh, dude, if you did a hoarder cat house right out of the gates with a dead cat in your ductwork, buddy, you got your education for sure. And you didn't lose on it. I mean, that's a win all the way around right there.
Exactly. Might have lost on the dollar per hour time frame, but that's just the price you pay sometimes.
That's it, man. I'll tell you what, the first couple, like my brother, I had him on the podcast early on, and yeah, he always talks about his first flip. He lost, I think, like 16 or 20,000 bucks or something on the first one. But Colton, how much was it to go to UW Minnesota?
It was about 15, 20K. Granted, I joined the National Guard, so I'm in the Army currently.
Oh, thanks for your
I'll
service,
pay
bro.
for it, but yeah, I mean that was probably a $60,000-$80,000 education right
There you
there.
go. 60 to 80 G's right down the tubes. Now you're making a little income thanks to that now with old Capital Credit Union there, but to make a few bucks, could you imagine getting paid a few bucks to go to college and learn a little thing or two? And Get out of there with a heck of an education, you know?
I think it would reshape a lot of how people think about money and the economy, and where they spend their time. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. My kids, like, I'm so proud of these kids. They sold some water and seashells on the bike trail behind our house.
oh,
Most likely illegally. I don't think you can sell things on the trail, but they did it, and I was out there helping, so I'm part of the crime. Uh,
cool.
yeah, I'm culpable. They made about 130 bucks in like 4 hours out there, which is
Really?
awesome. Yeah, like people were just giving them like $10, 20 bucks, and then they were like, "Hey, we should do this for the homeless." And I was like, "This is awesome. You guys are such good kids." Like they could have either way. I was proud of them. Like you're
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, take the money. But then they started advertising to people they were doing it for the homeless. I'm like, well, now you got to give it to the homeless. You can't change your mind after you start saying that, right? So they made these little packs. They went to Walmart. I took them to Walmart. They bought these little packs of like, little kits of like grooming kits and some other stuff and Bibles and these other things. And so we're leaving Florida tomorrow. And yesterday we went to this homeless shelter to we couldn't find enough homeless people. So we just went to the shelter to give them to them to distribute. And they kept the lady up there was so like, oh, you guys are great kids, all this stuff. She's like, where are you going to go to college? You got to go to college. And I'm like,
About that.
I don't know if you do. I don't think you do. I think you could do a flip and get a couple cats in your ducks, and you could get a heck of an education if that's the direction you want to go. You don't really need the college degree, but that's a whole nother podcast topic that you and I could get into. Talk about the cat thing because I want to stay on this for a minute. We have a lot of economy stuff we want to get into, but the cat one, I think for a lot of people, they're scared off by that. What did you learn by that? I mean, you mentioned kills. For those who don't know what that is, talk a little bit about what you guys did to get the cat smell out of there because that deters a lot of people. Animal smells.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing is when you have a property, right, that usually has a smell to it, is you got to figure out where's the smell coming from, where's it located, right? And so in this property, it was located everywhere. When you got 30 cats, they're not missing a spot.
Yeah.
So first thing we did was we tore everything out that you could remove, right? All the carpet,
Okay.
all the flooring. We had to remove all the cabinetry, a lot of the woodwork that was stained with the pee.
Like the
We got rid of,
subfloor.
yeah, we
Okay.
got rid of some of the subfloor. And then again, that sounds scary, but a lot of it was you're just taking the saw, cutting out the bad spots, putting in the new stuff, laying in the new OSB, and you were fine.
Okay.
And so the stuff that wasn't really visible and you could still smell it, we applied what we called kills. There's other stuff like Bryn primer, so it's like a primer paint that you can buy at your local Lowe's, Home Depot. It's about $150 for 5 gallons, and it covers pretty well. And so we basically took rollers and we rolled it over the entire floor, and even some of the wall areas, the lower wall areas where kind of pee can splash up. And we did about 1 to 2 coats of that through the entire house, and it was time consuming, but it was well worth the investment because afterwards it smelled like a brand new, house in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
you didn't have that odor lingering. We put some air fresheners in and some other stuff, in the paint to help, once we did the painting of it to help give it an even fresher smell. But
Yep. Yeah, I think that's one of the great point on this. Well, the reason I want to talk about this, Colton, is I hear this a lot from buyers. Is like, oh, there's with our process, we try to notate if there's a pet order because we don't let people walk through them until prior to closing. Once you're under contract within 3 days prior to closing, you can walk through the properties. But we try to tell people, hey, there's a pet smell, or like we have our inspectors note, hey, strong pet odor or something, so you can kind of budget for that. So if you have a house, you're gonna like the point here that I think that you just made that I want to emphasize. If you get a house that's like a hoarder house and you're gonna replace a lot of stuff anyway, the cat stuff is like budget a little bit extra for the kills and some subfloor and some other stuff, but it really isn't gonna be that much more than what you're gonna already do to the house to flip it anyway. Now, if you have a strong pet odor and the house is pretty nice, like pretty turnkey, that's where it can become a little bit more expensive. Like we have one right now we just closed on, and we're gonna just do a light remodel on it and put it on the market. But it has some carpet and there's a little bit of a dog odor in there, so we're gonna get the ductwork clean. We're gonna get the ductwork clean, and we're gonna replace the carpet, and we might throw some kills underneath on the subfloor just to make sure we got it all, and that's it, and then we're gonna turn it around. So not that big of a deal.
yeah, and I mean the other thing too with odors, right, is you just have to remove the source of odor too, right? That's huge, right? Like removing all the cats, having them out of there, right? We still had a cat living there,
Yeah.
peeing. Like we were killsing, and there was pee on top of the kills, right?
No way.
Yeah, because we didn't know where this cat was. It was a skittish cat. It was up in the ductwork. Like, you
Oh,
can't see it, right? You'd occasionally think you hear something, but when you're working in a property by
sure,
yourself late at night, you're like, that's just,
sure.
the friendly neighborhood ghost, coming to say hi. But like, yeah, it's just one of those things. You just don't know till you know, and it's a
Yeah,
solvable issue. And like you said, it's not as expensive as people think, right?
yeah,
You could be looking at $500 in materials, and then your labor, if you hire it out, a few $1,000s in
sure.
painting fees.
Yeah,
So,
not that big of a deal for sure. Well, good. I'm glad you guys made a couple bucks on that. You got a house hack, you got a flip under your belt. Now the sky's the limit for you guys. What's the goal for you? What are you guys seeing in the next few years as far as what you guys want to do personally in the real estate space?
that's a great question. I would love to continue to add and acquire. I think most real estate investors see, right, the power of being able to buy real estate, hold it for a long period of time. The one thing we don't talk about is, and we'll get to hit on today, but the amazing part of real estate is you can leverage it, right? As an underwriter, I'm supposed to hate leverage, right? It's the bane of like, these real estate investors. But when you look at the calculation of a 20-year amortization or 25-year amortization, and only having 20 or 30% down traditionally, right? Your minimum return is still like 6 or 7%. And that's not even appreciation. That's just you breaking even, paying that loan back, and basically turning that 20% into, having that property free and clear. So the just power of that is to continue to focus there. But I would say in the short term, the next 1 to 2 years is purely income. Got to focus on raising the income level, because the reality is real estate costs a lot of money. It's not cheap business to run and operate in. And so that's kind of the focus, is
Cool.
trying to develop some more income. So
Nice. You
more
gonna do that through some
flips.
more flips? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so more
Yep.
flips, and hopefully maybe I try one or two wholesales. But that game's hard. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
investment there. So there's
Yeah.
no free dinner out there.
No, and that's one thing I hope people understand. I get calls a lot from people who are like, I'm going to get into real estate. I'm going to start with wholesaling. And I'm like, you're starting with probably the hardest part of real estate. Like the easiest one to start, in my opinion, is rental real estate, because you can hire a property manager. They can do all the work for you in the properties. You don't have to build your contractor team and all that stuff, which, like you said, you had your dad helping you, but if you didn't have your dad helping you, you got to go find all these people to do all this stuff. And that
Yep.
can be a challenge in any market, but especially in the last few years, that's probably one of the bigger challenges, is finding people that are reliable, reasonable to do the work for you. Or you get a property management company, they've got hundreds of properties, they could leverage that, workload to get a more affordable pricing for you, and they can manage it all. All you got to do is find the deals and find the money. You get into flips, it's a little more challenging because now you got to build a contractor base. But when you do wholesaling, you got to find the property below what any flipper has to buy it at. And
Yep.
then B, you got to find the buyers to be able to buy it. So you have like really two businesses that you're starting when you start a wholesale business. You got to find the acquisition side, and then you got to also find the disposition or the buyers to sell it to. And people are like,
Yep.
oh, it'll be easy. Get a good deal. It's like, it's not as easy as you think, right? Everybody's got their little buy box, their little preferences of what they want, little neighborhoods they want. It can be a grind. So,
And given this market, right, Northeast Wisconsin is probably one of the most competitive, at least in Wisconsin, because there's not a lot of inventory, and there's a lot of sophisticated people that are looking to jump in and make a buck. So,
absolutely, bye. Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the economy. Let's transition now. So, as an underwriter, I'm interested, like, what are you looking at in your position? So, if I'm coming to you for a loan, how are you involved in like the economics of what the bank is doing? Or do you get involved in that at all? Or is that at different positions and they just kind of say, hey, Colton, here's what we're looking for as a bank right now. We want you to do this, this, or this, and underwrite it this way. How does that happen?
so for most institutions, the direction of the commercial portfolio is usually headed by the chief financial officer, chief credit officer.
Okay.
So kind of it's up to their discretion. So
Okay.
they get a goal from the CEO, and that says, hey, we want to grow by X amount.
Okay.
And so they hand that to the chief credit officer. And then their goal is to figure out how they reach that. And so Capital Credit Union, I would say we were really investor friendly to real estate folks 2 to 4 years ago, and we've transitioned more towards manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's kind of the preference of what that lead person has and kind of their experience. So like a lot of local community banks, a lot of the ones that you guys mentioned are great for real estate investors because
Mm-hmm.
that's their bread and butter. They get a lot of folks to come through. They
Mhm.
can continue to grow their loan portfolio from that. And even the credit unions, I mean, we do still quite a bit of real estate ourselves. And so the focus is just kind of what is the goal of growth?
Mhm.
With rates kind of being higher, the cash flow is a lot tighter. And so
Mhm.
I would say that's kind of where people may have seen that some of the banks and stuff have kind of walked back a little bit on real estate, or it's a little bit tighter on trying to get money on the commercial side. But, there's still money out there if the deal's right. I always tell people, you can get the best deal if you run your numbers right. If your DSCR, if your property's cash flowing and you have good equity position, like you're going to get a loan and it's going to be approvable. Where it gets tricky is people come in, the property doesn't cash flow, they didn't run their numbers right. They're trying to get a loan, max loan to value, 80%. And it can be difficult when you just don't run those numbers beforehand and you
Yeah.
come to us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what I love what you just said there is Capital's, switch to manufacturing a little bit more. They want that in their portfolio a little bit more. And this is a point I make to a lot of people too, is, it's really important to have a lot of lines in the water with different lenders because the appetites change. Like you said, the goal changes for the bank. They're like, okay, cool. Our silo over here is pretty full on real estate right now, or the interest rates change. We want to go to this sector. We want to do this. And then if your only relationship is with that one bank, you're like, hey, well, buddy, we just did, last 3 years we were doing this. What? And they're like, yeah, but our appetite changed now. And then you're like, crap, now I got to go start all of these relationships over again. Where you got to go give a lot of the banks all the same information anyway when you go try to get pre-approved. You might as well just get pre-approved by a bunch of them and then just maintain that relationship and continually check in on like, hey, how are you guys doing on rates? What's your appetite for real estate right now? Da, 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 and
Yep.
just stay up to Brett. Like, and then you just kind of use them as chess pieces for each deal. And sometimes they, I found some banks really like a certain type of deal. So if I bring
Yep.
them a certain asset class within real estate, they might be like, oh yeah, we really want this one. We'll give you this rate or this, or they might be like, your rate's going to be here. You go to another bank, they're 1% less. You're like, oh, great. Let's go over here, and just maintaining a lot of lines in the water I found has really been helpful for us over the years.
No, that's huge. And banks don't get offended by that. Like
Right.
we know it's a business, right? One of the things that I like to talk to people about is like, you got to build a relationship, like you said, right? Have those conversations, have the stuff ready. I did a presentation on this back in September for one of the local RIA groups, and it was on commercial underwriting and how we look at deals. And my big piece of advice to people is have a lender folder. So have a PFS, which is a personal financial statement. Have that filled out. So all you got to do is change the date, change a couple of the numbers. You can send that off right away. Have 3 years of taxes, your business and personal, all in this lender folder. And then another separator is when you're bringing a deal, have a proposal, have a fact sheet of what the deal looks like, what you're going to be doing to it, what your end goal of the deal is, right? So say if you bought it from a wholesaler, okay, talk about the price you bought it at, talk about the condition it was, talk about the condition it is today. Show that level of competency that you're able to operate these deals and you're able to make the numbers work. And then show them, hey, this is the goal is to continue to grow this, show that you have an appetite of wanting to grow and you want to build that relationship with them. That's valuable. And then the other thing that any business is communication. If you can communicate, respond timely to your lenders, like they're not asking questions just to make your life hard. They're trying to figure out information so that they feel secure in the transaction.
Yep.
Because remember, the lending institution's holding 80% of the money to buy this property, right? Like they have more skin in the game, right? To make these deals work. Like they don't want to lose money either.
Yeah.
You show you're competent, you show them this lender folder, you communicate clearly, like right there, you're ahead of the game.
Yeah. My guess is Colton, that's such good nuggets. I hope everybody goes back and listens to that. That's looking, to get lending going from institutions, and hard money lenders are going to want the same thing. So like, even though it's more relationship based in the hard money lending and there's no real standard there, I guess every hard money lender is a little bit different on what they want. They still want a few things. They want communication. All of them do. They want competency, right? Those are like two major things. They want to know you got your crap together and you know what you're doing. That's all there's to it. And if you're brand new and you don't know, find a mentor, somebody who knows and has been there before, and just talk to them about what should I do on this property, and then to communicate that to your lenders after talking to your mentor. on those type of things. But I think that's really, really important. Communication and competency, like the bar's pretty low out there right now, guys.
It
Like
is.
if you can do those couple things and I'm talking not even lenders, just in general, you're going to stand out above the crowd and people are going to want to do business with you because not many people do those very basic things.
No, and this is the thing too. It's like everyone thinks it's purely numbers, right? I would say half of a loan approval decision is literally, can we trust this person to repay us?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you build that trust? It's stuff I just mentioned earlier. Have your documentations ready. Have the clear communications. Answer the questions before they even have to be asked. That's the one thing is you see sometimes people trying to hide stuff. Like, oh, I'm not going to mention this, but we're looking through everything, right? That's as an underwriter, we're trying to unearth, dig up any pieces of information, get ahead of the curve.
Yep.
It's not going to hurt you.
Yep. For sure. Yep. It's always better to just let people know what's going on and be upfront and transparent about it if you can before they have to find out and ask you about it. Right.
Yep.
Yep. For sure. Colton, let's get into the economy a little bit, brother. So what are you seeing right now? I mean, right now, as we're recording this, it's mid-April, right? We just had some tariffs go out, big tariff every time I talk. Any problem now, the joke in our family is like, why did my kid do that? It's probably tariffs. That's probably why they're acting up. It's probably the tariff. But seriously, like the tariffs went in, then they're paused, except for China. And that's, there's a lot of turbulence going on. I saw the 10-year treasury went from like 4.3, 4.4 down into threes, then back to 4.4, which, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I don't know exactly what that means, but I don't imagine that's probably healthy for most things. But what are you seeing overall as far as it relates to the economy? And let's talk a little bit more about like Wisconsin and maybe even Northeast Wisconsin, since that's where you're based, on what you're seeing on the economic side of things as the underwriter and the lender here.
For sure. We'll touch on the tariff part real quick. The best meme I've seen for it is if you ever watch Karate Kid, tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs on, tariffs off, right? It's
oh, that's awesome. I haven't seen that one yet.
It's just back and forth, So what the tariffs have done, and you kind of talked about it, is they've created a lot of uncertainty. So you can kind of see that in all of the Fed surveys. The University of Michigan survey that came out last Friday was the lowest in 4 years, like depths of the COVID pandemic, like level of lack of confidence. It was from these tariffs. What does that actually mean? Nobody knows, right? So that's the best part about economics is like there's a lot of forward-looking indicators, and right now, to be honest, those look horrible. The CEO surveys. Just not a lot of confidence. United Airlines just came out with their earnings on Friday, and they said we have guidance for a recession and we have guidance for normal state, but we don't know which way we're going.
Wow.
So like even major corporations do not know where we're headed.
Okay.
So that level of uncertainty causes the 10-year to go up, causes interest rates to go up because the bond market, they want to be paid a premium for that uncertainty. They want to be secure.
Yeah.
So the tariff front, who knows? We'll see 3-6 months from now what actually happened. What did the administration strike a deal on or not strike a deal on? And we can kind of pick up the pieces that are left over from that. Hopefully, I'm of the mindset. Hopefully, they cut deals and they figure this out quicker than they have been. And we can move forward because the reality is we all want to operate on a certain level playing field. We want to kind of know what the rules of the game are. And when the rules of the game are shifting, it's tough to operate.
Yeah. I think to touch on that a little bit, one thing we've seen over the last year and a half or so is everybody just got used to like, here's where the rates are. And that's the game we're playing. And so I can effectively run my numbers now based off of what I think I'm going to be able to get a interest rate at. And I think what you just talked about is when we have uncertainty, it starts to create people to pull back a little bit and they start going, which usually and you tell me if I'm crazy on this, Colton, but when I see people pull back, typically I run into it. I'm like, ooh, good, more opportunity for me. Sweet. And then I'll acquire a bunch of properties and everybody else sits on the sidelines because they're like, I don't know what, and especially like you talked about your goals. You want to buy and hold more assets. We all realize the buy and hold game is how you build true wealth in this world. And like these next 3 to 6 to 12 months, if there's a lot of uncertainty and I can pick up some deals because of that, because people are shedding properties a little bit cheaper, and I don't know what my interest rate's going to be, but I don't care because I'll just refinance that sucker when interest rates go down in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or whatever it is, any comment on that? Anything you want to touch on there?
Yeah, I mean, you got to buy the property, right? The interest, you're buying the house, not the interest rate. It's a good realtor term. And the reality is interest rates fluctuate. They go up and down. And the great part of the country we live in is you can get 30-year fixed rate debt on that, right? When, typical 1 to 4, multifamily. And so when the time comes, when rates are lower, you can refinance that and make that cash flow, just skyrocket. And, one of the things that we can kind of see is rates are expected to go down. So even with this uncertainty, right, if the economy were to go in the worst case scenario, and this is a good segue to just kind of real estate pricing, if we go into a recession, interest rates come down. The Federal Reserve is not going to let the economy flounder. They're not going to let everyone lose their job. They're going to cut rates faster than you can think, right? Think of COVID, think of 2008. The Fed will backstop the economy, right? And so that's kind of the term right now. It's labor over inflation is the terminology that they're using in the market for cutting interest rates. So we had a little bit of data come out today. It's called the initial unemployment claims. Every Thursday at 7:30 a.m. Central Time, these numbers come out. This month was like 219,000, or this week was 219,000. Not a lot. If you see that number climbing above 250 into the 300s each week, then you're like, oh, we're going into a recession. That was what was happening back in September and August of last year, and that's when you saw interest rates at its lowest point in the last 4 years.
Okay. Got it.
So labor is going to be the primary driver of where we go with the rates. Okay. But if rates go lower, you're going to be able to refi. You're going to be able to get in, get that property refinanced, and cash flow is going to be better. So you just got to go in and bite the bullet. Underwrite a little more conservative, have a little more reserves. I don't think anyone's going to go broke if you have that 6 to 12 months, of reserves.
Right.
So just having that cushion, and you know what, maybe you're not buying 10 properties, but you could buy 8, right?
Right. Yeah. Just don't sit on the sidelines. Just don't
exactly.
Just dollar cost average it. That's all there is to it. Yep. Now interest rates, if the Fed, correct me if I'm wrong here, Cole, but if the interest rates from the Fed drop, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see a drop on our mortgage rates, correct?
Yep. So there's 2 separate categories. So the Federal Reserve, they control what we call a picture a yield curve. So a little thing. So the yield curve, the Fed controls the short end of the yield curve. The long end of the yield curve is controlled by the market, the bond market. And similar things influence both, right? Inflation, right? When inflation was running high 2-3 years ago, 8-9%, both ends of the yield curve were higher because the market and the Fed was raising rates to compensate for the higher inflation. So when the Fed cuts the short end of the yield curve, the federal funds rate is what it's called, that lowers the 3-month, 2-year, and that will follow. So what that would affect is your prime rate. So your line of credits, you'll see a 0.25% kind of come on there. You'll see auto loans usually followed lower as well with the Fed. But the 30-year mortgage rate that we're talking about, that's purely tied to the 10-year Treasury. And so there's a great chart on it. If you just Google what makes up my 10-year Treasury or my 30-year mortgage, there's the 10-year Treasury, and then you have basically what the bank or the lending institution needs to make on that. So that's another, 1 to 2%. And then you have the market, whoever you're selling these loans off. So most loans, if people didn't know this, on the 30-year side get sold off to the market. So you go to your local bank, credit union, you take out your application, you get that loan on your house. The bank will then turn around and sell that out to a bigger, more liquid player because the bank doesn't want to service that. They don't make their money there. And so that is influenced by a few different factors, but it's primarily the 10-year treasury. And how is that influenced? We can go down that rabbit hole of, it's basically what we're talking about earlier, inflation and the labor market.
So those are the two major things. If I'm like, hey, what's going to happen with mortgage rates? Yes, I can look at the 10-year treasury, but if I want to go a little bit more granular, I'm going to be following that report every Thursday morning on the labor statistics. And so if unemployment rises, then we should start to see some drop in the mortgage rate.
Yeah. You will see a drop in the 10-year, right? And so the reason why I go back to the 10-year, because it's more purely correlated to the data, right? So if the 10-year drops, the 30-year will follow it, but sometimes it doesn't follow the 10-year perfectly. And that's because what we were talking about earlier is uncertainty. So when there's a higher level of uncertainty in the market, the difference between the 30-year and the 10-year can kind of fluctuate, right? So the 10-year could go down and your 30-year stays a little bit the same because we don't know what's going on in the economy. Both will come down, but they just might not come down at the same rate.
Okay. Got it. That makes sense. Colton might have lost you here for a second. So Colton, we just talked about the 30-year fixed rate for more people. Like if you're flipping, that's really important for who's going to buy your house, right? What about like for me as the investor on the commercial side? How does any of this stuff affect rates on the commercial side of things?
Yep. So, as we talked, right, the federal funds rate is kind of on that shorter end of the yield curve. And, the Fed funds affects everything in the sense that it's just kind of the baseline interest rate that the government's willing to pay on the money. And for the commercial side, what it really ties to, each institution's a little bit different. But it ties heavily to they call it the 5-year FHLB. It's similar to the 10-year. It's just another market bond rate. But this is more based on the 5-year, and that's because most institutions do a 3 to 5 year arm, they call it, right? And so that's why they kind of base it on a little bit of the shorter end of the curve. And the commercial side, what they do is they do a spread. So because most commercial institutions, they keep the loan in-house, right? Capital Credit Union gives you a loan, we keep it, right? Community First gives you a loan, they keep it, right? On the commercial side of things, they're not turning around and selling it on the back end like they do with the traditional 30-year mortgage product. And so because of that, they have a spread that they need to make on that to be able to stay in business. And roughly that's between 250 basis points and 350 basis points. Depending on your really relationship, it can fluctuate by a good 1%. So for those who in the audience who don't know what a basis point is, it's basically 1/100th of a percent, right? So it's 0.001 is 1 basis point or 0.01. So it's basically 100 basis points equals 1%. So 1 basis point is 0.01%. So when we refer to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so is the 5-year, if I watch the 10-year treasury and I see that going down, right? Then I'm like, oh, cool. 30-year rates are probably going to come down at some point. To follow that. Is that similar? Like, is the 10-year then, is that an indicator I could watch and say, oh, the 5-year is probably going down too? Or what are the factors you mentioned earlier? The labor over inflation is the thing to be watching. Is that similar to the 5-year, or are there different things to be watching for that 5-year?
So it's similar. If the economy is going into a recession, the short end of the yield curve, as they call it, the federal funds rate, to the 2-year treasury, it'll start to drop. Like, so the numbers came out today earlier. The 2-year kind of stayed relatively the same because they weren't good, they weren't bad, didn't really change anything. But if the numbers were bad, you would see a 10 basis point drop, which is pretty significant in the lower end. And that starts to price in kind of what they think the market thinks the Fed will do. And so Yeah, it's really just kind of watching what the labor market does and how that, starts to trend. The market will front run any recession, so they'll know beforehand. Like if you see the bond market right now, there's the 10-year and the 2-year, they call it the 10-2 spread.
Okay.
Right now it's 50 basis points. So right now the 2-year treasury is, let's just say it's 3.5%,
Okay.
and the 10-year treasury is at 4%. So there's a 50 basis point spread. And that usually indicates when you sit at that level, there's some bad stuff going on in the economy, or there's a recession kind of coming
Okay.
near. That's usually when stuff tips off. But yeah, for the average investor, if you just look at the weekly unemployment claims and you just kind of see the trend, right? Not one report's going to change anything. It's the trend of the report. So they call it Jobs Friday. It's the first Friday of the month. Typically, the jobs report for the prior month comes out.
Okay.
And same thing, the Federal Reserve wants to see a trend of these data points before they make any decisions on what
Okay.
they're going to be doing.
Okay.
And that's what affects kind of the market rate.
So one bad month isn't gonna do anything. One great month isn't gonna do anything. It's gonna be what's the pattern that we're seeing, and then their Fed's gonna do something based off the pattern or hold it based off the pattern.
Exactly. And
Okay.
that's the same thing with the commercial loan rates, right? You see the 5-year could be fluctuating, right? It's not just, flat line, it goes up and down.
Okay.
Your commercial lender is not going to just follow that to the T. That's why you see most people quote around 7%. And that's kind of been that way for the last 6 to 7 months, or almost even a year. It's been that 7 to 7.5%. And the reason why it kind of stays there is just because it's hard to fluctuate with the market. It's
Sure.
up and down every day. So you want to have some level of consistency.
Mhm.
And some investors would have saw that pricing was a little bit better, probably back in last August, September timeframe
Mhm.
for commercial loans. If you were getting a quote, it can affect the market, especially when, institutions are trying to grow. They can be more aggressive when the 5 year is lower, but typically they'll try and keep it steady. So, like if the
Okay.
Fed cuts, which is projected in June, is the next 25 basis point cut,
Okay.
you'll see overall the market come down a little bit, at least
Okay.
25 basis points. So, you'll instead of 7, you'll be at 6.75
Okay.
roughly.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Well, that is good to know, man. What about just as we kind of get to a wrap here, Colton? What about overall economics? Before we got on here, you were showing me a pretty cool site, and if you want to talk a little bit about that, and then how people could use it to do their own research as time goes on. So if you're listening to this, say 3 months from now, everything we're talking about might be irrelevant, other than this point, right? That we're talking about here of how somebody could maybe do some of their own research and stay up to snuff on different market trends in your market, whether that's Northeast Wisconsin, Madison, Wausau, whatever the case is. If you want to just touch on a little bit of what this data is and how somebody could really use it to benefit themselves as a real estate investor.
For sure. So I'm going to plug one thing is if you want to know where the Federal Reserve is going, or at least what the market thinks, it's called the CME Fed Watch Group. You type that in, or Fed Watch, if you type that into your whatever browser, Google, you usually click the first link and you slide over to your screen. There'll be a thing that says probabilities. You click on that, it will show you for the next 12 to 18 months of where the market anticipates the federal funds rate will be.
Ah,
And that can give you an anticipation of where interest rates will be 6 to 12 months from now. It changes every day. It changes when the data releases. But right now, the market's predicting basically 5 to 6 rate cuts over the next year and a half. So
wow.
it's about 1 to 1.5%. So
Wow.
that's the first link.
What was it called? CME
CME Fed Watch Group.
Fed Watch Group.
Type
Okay,
that
I'll put
in.
that in the notes. I'll put that in the show notes. Fed Watch Group. Okay.
Yep. So great plug there. Just say, hey, because people ask the lenders like, hey, where are interest rates going, right? We work in banking. We don't know.
Yeah.
And you point to this, like this is the most accurate thing that's out there. Most
Okay.
economics people will refer to it.
Okay.
So that's that one. The one that Corey here is talking about, it's called the Redfin Data Center. And so you go to that, you type in Redfin data instead of Google, you scroll down, you'll see something that kind of comes up called Redfin Weekly Housing Market Data. And there's a whole list of options that we can touch on here. But then for those of you who are in Green Bay, you go to the region name, where it'll say all Redfin metros. You type in Green Bay, and you'll get your local metro data. So for us, it's Green Bay.
Hmm. Yeah. And what I struggled when we were on here prior, Colton. So for those of you guys listening, you go to the website, you go down, you have to like kind of look to the right side of your page, off to the right of the graphs. And then it's like the second little drop down. You'll see a little drop down thing. And you click on that where it says all metros. And then you can type in Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee, wherever you're listening to this. And you can get just really you could nerd out for a long time on this website.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's got like 3 to 4 years of prior data, so you can kind of see what are the trends in your market, see what's going on. And I think that's to the point that you're going to go with here is if you go to Green Bay and you type in, right, we're doing this kind of live right now, and you type it in, you can do a 4 week or 12-week average. I personally like the 12-week average. It kind of smooths out the data a little bit, gives you a more clearer picture of the trend. And you just go to new listings median price. And this is what the real estate investors here are going to love to hear and see is prices are up 10% year over year, right? Our
Woo!
median listing price in Green Bay right now per Redfin data as of April 13th is over $340,000. That's the
Wow.
listing median price, right? A year ago, that price was 313,000.
Woo! So
Uh,
buy and hold investors, your assets went up over the last year, right?
yeah.
Good for you. For those of you flipping, I would say for me that what that tells me as a flipper is like if I can stay around the median for my list price or under, I'm going to have a lot of buyers that can
Yep.
afford that house, right? Is that what you would say from that as a banker, Colton?
I totally concur. And, this is, you've talked to realtors in the area that anything over to that 320, 330 marker, that median number, it's tough out there. It's longer days on the market. You're going to have a little bit less competition, but anything under that, it's flying off the shelf. You're still getting multiple offers.
Mm,
And that was one of the conversations we had is just, if you can get a lower price property and fix it up, there's a buyer pool there for you.
that's amazing. So I love this stuff, man. I could nerd on this type of stuff all day. So I'll put that in the show notes as well, guys. The Redfin Data Center, so you guys could go nerd on that as well if you're into nerding on things like that. But that's just a good indicator. Like in 12 months, look at how much that's changed the median. So if your buy box, if you're going to use this to help develop your buy box, right? Of like, hey, where do I want if I'm flipping properties, where do I want to be? I want to be at the median price or below, right? For my ARV. Well, now that's going to change. So you want to be checking that on a regular basis, or you're going to be missing out on deals because you're stuck in a 12, you're stuck at 313 and your ARVs are like, this one's at 325. I don't want to go over. Boom. Now you just missed out on a great opportunity to get one right in the hot price point there. Right.
Yeah, and the other point too, right? If you want to go to this and kind of see what's going on in your market is you can track what's the new listings data, right? There's a lot of doomers out there. They call it doom porn, or they're just like, oh, the housing market's going to crash. The housing market's going to crash. And you look at the new listings just in Green Bay, we're on track for 2024 numbers. Like we're in the same trend. There's nothing abnormal right now that's going on in the market. There's low inventory. There's a lot of demand still. And so those factors haven't changed. And the other thing too is there's another great chart if you just look up, year over year real estate prices, just even in the country. There's been two periods in the last 40 years where real estate prices have gone down. It was 1995 and then 2008 to 2011. That was the only time where real or like nominal housing prices went down. Every other year, prices have gone up in recession or not recession. And that's kind of that point where we were talking about earlier. If interest rates come down during a recession, guess what that does? That opens up your buyer pool, right? That opens up demand because most people make their purchase based on the monthly payment that they can afford. And when interest rates go down, guess what? That monthly payment opens up your
Price
entire
point goes up.
aperture of what they can pay for a property.
Yep.
And so
Yep. It's so
it's,
interesting. People don't buy on price, they buy on payment.
yep.
So yeah, and right now, if prices are still going up over the last 3 years, when interest rates have gone to the highest they've been since since the 80s, maybe,
Yep.
or maybe the 2000s. I think
Early 2000s, but
2006.
unaffordability of housing is as bad as it was in the 80s when interest rates are at 20%.
Wow. So
Right?
if prices are still going up in this, can you imagine what the price of your assets going to do when the interest rates drop? It's going to go up. So if you're sitting on the sidelines, this is my take on it, Colton. You tell me if I'm crazy on this. If you're sitting on the sidelines waiting for interest rates to go down, what you're basically doing is just waiting to pay a higher price for that same property.
That's what history goes to show you.
Yeah.
And inventory levels are still historically low. There's another great chart of like nationally. If you just look up national inventory levels, we're roughly at 1.3 million right now. If you go pre-COVID, you're roughly at 2 million. You go at peak recession, 2008, great financial crisis, real estate bubble, we're at 4 million. So we're at a
Wow.
quarter of what the great financial crisis was. We're
Wow.
at almost half of what we were pre-COVID. So it just goes to show you the current dynamics aren't there for a big housing crash. And the only areas where you see prices going down are Texas and Florida. And that's because the new build construction there is heavy, right? And so it's a supply and demand thing. And every other metro area, Northeast Wisconsin, we're just not building enough. And it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's expensive to build and
Yep.
builders don't want to lose money.
Right. In construction, I just read something this morning, actually kind of preparing for this on some of the economic stuff I get every day in my inbox. And they were talking about builder confidence is really, really low right now because of the uncertainty. They don't know where prices are going to be on the materials and all this other stuff. So they're pulling back on building new stuff again,
Yep.
which is just going to create a bigger housing issue, which
Yep.
again, depending on what side of the fence you're on, the best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago. Second best time is today. And
Yep.
it's not, prices aren't, in my humble opinion, I'm no Robert Kiyosaki here or some other financial gurus, but in my opinion, I don't see housing prices coming down for a long, long time. Like you said, twice in the last 40 years, pretty safe bet. I think I did a solo episode a while back with a chart that shows the losses in real estate. And I think 6 out of the last 76 years, I think it's something like that. We've either had zero growth or loss.
Yep.
So pretty safe bet.
And 4 of those years was from 08 to basically 2012.
Yeah.
And that was, again, a whole different dynamic. You had ninja loans where people could qualify for anything. The builders were building left and right. We don't have those dynamics. Lending's tighter, building's a lot less. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, Colt, we got to wrap here, buddy. I know you actually have a real job that you have to go do. So we'll let you get to that, man. Before we wrap, though, we always ask a little fun question here. And part of the reason we do this is I have people outside of Wisconsin that are like, hey, I might want to invest in Wisconsin. What is Wisconsin all about? What's your favorite Wisconsin tradition or place to visit here in the great state?
So, favorite tradition, I was thinking about this. I love a good supper club. I know a good Friday fish fry. You go to the supper club, you go to a nice salad bar, get the salad, you have your double drinks, from that 5 to 7 happy hour, and then you get a good fish fry. It's a little clam chowder.
Oh,
It's hard to beat that.
Absolutely, man. That's been a real popular one on the show, the old Friday, supper clubs. And what's funny is I just grew up thinking everybody has these, and it's really like a Wisconsin up, maybe Minnesota thing. But outside of that, it's not very popular outside of here. So
no, very traditional Midwest, Wisconsin. And cheese curds, that's another one. You got to plug cheese curds in Wisconsin. Culver's, great Wisconsin brand. I know they're expanded elsewhere, but can't beat either of those. As far as the location, I'll answer that second part. I haven't heard this one much, but I love the Northwoods, Minocqua. It's so pretty. The Minocqua Tomahawk area, all the lakes up there. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm a Door County-in, which that comes up once in a while now. But I still prefer being in the Northwoods. Like if our family was like closer that way, I would move up to the Northwoods of Wisconsin. There's like nothing like it. I travel all over the place, and I still love the Northwoods of Wisconsin. So I'm right there with you, buddy. That's probably my favorite spot in the state too.
Yeah, Door County gets a lot of love, so I want to give the Northwoods some love. It's a lot less traveled, a little bit more rustic.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But a lot more lakes. I like the inland lake. I love living by the bay, but the water's so dang cold. Like you can't, it's like by maybe mid-July, I can actually get in there. And then that lasts all of 2 weeks before August cold nights kick in. And then I'm like, dang, well, that was fun. Well, it lasted. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, Colt, man, this has been awesome, dude. This is one of my favorite episodes we've recorded so far. I love talking about all this kind of economic stuff. I'd love to have you back on, as the year progresses and, things start to shake out a little bit if you're up for that, man.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I love providing data and value. The end of the day is we can all be our own resource, use the Redfin Data Center, use the other links, and just stay aware. But as Corey always says, take action, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely, brother. If anybody wants to connect up with you, Colton, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, man?
Yeah. Facebook, Kolten Van Elzen, KoltenVanElzen. If anyone wants to reach out, I'll give out my number. But that's 920-639-5884. But I try and post weekly, bi-weekly, some sort of econ update, some sort of
Sweet.
just kind of lesson to learn and see what's going on, so you can kind of help understand, and make a sense of what's going on out there.
Beautiful, man. Well, thanks for being on, buddy. This has been great. And if you're out there listening to this and you're like, hey, guys, I would love to get in the game, but I'm not ready to start looking at deals yet. I just have some questions or whatever. You don't have to sign up for the buyers list for us at Wisconsin Discount Properties. You can just go to the website and fill out the contact us form. That's going to be a little bit different. What'll happen is somebody from our team, Reese, me, Connor, one of us will reach out to you and have a conversation and just try to help you answer some questions, connect you to some great people like Colton or whoever else out there you might need as a resource, and try to help you make that first step into getting into this exciting game that we love here called real estate investing. With that, Colton, we're going to wrap, buddy. I appreciate you, man, and appreciate you being on. And thank you guys all for listening. If you guys got some value out of this episode, please share this thing. It's not necessarily for us to help grow the audience. Like, we love that. We appreciate that. But I go back to the ripple effect, right? Like, you guys sharing this show, if there's value here and you think somebody could benefit from this, there's people out there that are stuck working a 9 to 5 that they hate every single day. And this one episode could be the thing that triggers them to take action to change their life and their kids' lives and those kids' lives and the futures of that. So please share the show, be a friend. Let's get the word out there. And then with that, we'll see you guys on the next episode.